Welcome to our channel. Here we publish free of charge the most useful and interesting books every week. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to not miss the next videos. Good listening. Think and become rich. The Laws of Napoleon Hill's Success. The Rules of Success. Read by Jamie. Introduction. Dedicate to Andrew Carnegie, who suggested me write this course. Henry Ford, whose achievements form the basis of almost all the lessons of the course. Edwin Sebin, associate of Thomas A. Edison, whose warm friendship over a period of more than 15 years allowed me to continue my work, to face many annoyances. Multiple temporary failures encountered in the planning of this course. All you are, or will become, is the result of the use of your spirit. Napoleon Hill. A word from the editors. Anne and Bill Hartley about this new edition. Revised. The laws of success include key principles that form the basis of Napoleon Hill's philosophy, which is directly related to personal accomplishment. The genesis of the principles explored in this book dates from the day in 1900 when Napoleon H. was assigned to write a magazine article about the steel baron and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. During the interview, which was to be brief by the young writer, Mr. Carnegie voluntarily lengthened the session, and it became a 3-day marathon in conclusion. Mr. Carnegie offered Napoleon Hill to make him meet the most powerful men of the time, so they could discover the secrets of their success. Mr. Carnegie believed that by doing so, Mr. Hill could formulate a philosophy that could be used by all those who wanted to help themselves, create their own success, and fulfill their dreams. While pursuing his mission, Napoleon H. wrote thousands of articles of chronicles, started his own magazine, developed home courses, set up training centers, and opened a college in business education, all these companies being inspired by his growing philosophy. He also created a series of conferences which provided the opportunity to make himself known as an influential speaker on the theme of success and personal fulfillment. While building his experience, Napoleon Hill constantly checked and modified his theories to the point where they could be synthesized into a group of specific principles, which together contributed to form the coherent philosophy that was represented Andrew Carnegie during the preparation of this new edition of the Laws of Success. We tried to make the author, Napoleon Leon Hill, as contemporary as possible, as his own, if he was still with us. The text was considered as if he were a living author. We opted for a contemporary use of grammar, without taking into account the formulation that might have seemed less modern. If some grammatical forms were obscure, we made minor modifications to it. The way to update the contents of the book consisted of a very stimulating challenge. By carefully revising the original text, it became obvious that the answer was not to simply replace the examples cited by Mr. Hill with similar stories of our modern world. We realized that the anecdotes and examples used by Mr. Hill H. was so supportive of the perspective he wanted to evoke or principle that he discussed, that to replace them, just for the sake of using a more contemporary name, would not improve the quality of his message. So we concluded that the best course was rather to add additional stories that would confirm that the laws of success is a living philosophy. Additional examples were judiciously inserted as a reminder that the principles on which the laws of success are based was relevant when the first book was published in 1928. It still applied 75 years later in 2003, and no doubt will continue to be evident and applicable for at least the next 75 years, plus contemporary example, where we thought the listeners would be interested. We also added fringe comments that provide additional information about the past to the historical context, and when necessary, suggested books that complement the various aspects of Napoleon Hill's philosophy. All fringe comments are easily spotted throughout the preparation of this revised edition. We appreciated the cooperation of the Napoleon Hill Foundation as well as the Napoleon Hill Learning Center. Thanks to their assistance, we were able to draw inspiration from past editions, as well as other materials already written by Napoleon Hill, and this in order to incorporate the final evolution of his philosophy, by which to present the edition the most comprehensible of the laws of success. Good listens to an author's word from the 1928 edition. Several years ago, a young ecclesiastical named Gonzales announced in the Chicago newspapers that he would make the following Sunday a sermon titled, "What I Would Do with $1,000,000. The announcement caught the attention of Philippe des Armour, the powerful king of packaging, who decided to go listen to what this pastor had to say. The latter described a great school of technology, where young people would learn to succeed in life by developing their ability to think in a practical way, rather than by theoretical term. They would be taught to learn by experimentation. If I had $1,000,000, says the young preacher, I will start such a school. When the sermon is finished, Mr. Armour went to the flesh, presented himself, and told the young pastor, I think you can do everything you talked about. If you want to come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you the $1,000,000 you need. There is always capital available for those who can design practical plans. That is how the Armour Institute of Technology was born, one of the most pragmatic technology schools in the country. It was designed in the imagination. A young man who would never be heard of outside the community where he preached had not been of his imagination, allied with the capital of Philippe Deredeth. Every great project, financial institution, of great importance, undertaken, and great invention is first in the imagination of someone. F. W. Woolworth designed the plan of stores 5, 10, 15 in his imagination before making it a reality that made him multimillionaire. Thomas A. Edison imagined the phonograph, the cartoon apparatus, the incandescent electric light bulb, and a multitude of other useful inventions before it became reality. During the fire of the city from Chicago, several shopkeepers whose shops had been destroyed decided to settle in other cities to start all over again, except Marshall Field, who imagined on the same site where his former store had become piles of smoking beam, the largest retail store in the world, dreams that has materialized happily. The individual who learns early in his life to use his imagination, because it is at this moment that the greatest possibilities are offered to him. The imagination is a faculty of the mind that can be cultivated and deployed when stimulated. If not, this course on the laws of success would never have seen the day, because it has first conceived in my imagination from the simple seed of an idea that has sprung up following a fortuitous remark of Mr. Andrew Carnegie. Whoever you are and whatever your occupation, you can increase your efficiency and productivity by developing and activating your imagination. Success in this world always lies in the individual effort that is provided. But you are mistaken if you believe you can succeed without the collaboration of others. It is an individual effort only insofar as each individual must decide what he wants. This approach, nevertheless, requires the contribution of the imagination. From then, success depends only on the ability to invite other people to cooperate. Before you can assure the cooperation of others, before even daring to hope for their collaboration, you must first demonstrate yourself a willingness to cooperate. The purpose of the course, The Laws of Success, is to allow you to find the way to become more successful in the field of action that you have chosen. This analysis is necessary in order to be able to classify your qualities and your abilities. You can thus channel them to maximize the power and the effectiveness. Maybe you do not appreciate the work that you are currently doing. There are two ways to get out. The first is to not to invest too much and to do only the minimum, just what it will be necessary to get you out fast, done because you will quickly be fired. The other way, the best, is to make you so useful and efficient that you will attract the attention of your superiors, who will offer you a promotion for a more responsible work that you will like it. It is your privilege to make the choice as to how you will get there. Thousands of people have passed on the large copper mine that was ignited without discovering it. A single man used his imagination, dug the ground a few meters, analyzed it, and discovered the richest copper deposit in the world. Sometimes you walk on your calculated mine. Its discovery is a matter of research and imagination. This course, The Laws of the World, Success, can guide you to your calumet mine, and you will be surprised to find you standing just above it in your current work. In his lecture entitled The Fortune at Your Disposal, Russell Cromwell says that we do not need to look for the right opportunity very far, as we can find it under our feet. This is a truth that should be remembered. Napoleon Hill, author of The Laws of Success. To the author's thanks for the help received during the writing of this course. This course is the result of a careful analysis of the achievements of more than 100 men and women who have achieved an unusual success in their respective professions. I put more 20 years in analyzing, classify, test, and assemble the laws on which the course is based. For the design and completion of this work, I received invaluable help either by the personal meeting or study of the achievements of the following people: Henry Ford, Edward B.C.K., Thomas A. Edison, Cyrus H.K. Curtis, Harvey A. Firestone, George W. Perkins, John D. Rockefeller, Henry L. Doherty, Charles M. Schwab, George S. Parker, Woodward Wilson, Dr. C. Henry, Darwin P. Kingsley, General Rufus William Riley, George Judge Elbert H. Garr, Albert Tasker, William Howard Taft, Edward Albert Phelan, Dr. Elmer James G. Hill, John W. Davis, Captain George M. Alexander, from whom I was assistant, Samuel Gers, Frank W. Woolworth, H.U.G. Chalmers, Judge Daniel Terr, one of my law professors, Dr. Edward Strickler, Edwin Combs, Elbert Hart, Robert L. Taylor, Fedling, Bob Luther Burbank, O. Harrian, George Eisman, John Baroff, Ellsworth, Milton Statler, Edward Henry Harriman, Andrew Carnegie, Charles P. Steinmetz, John Momaker, Frank Vanderlip, Marshall Field, Theodore Roosevelt, Gerald William H. French, Dr. Alexander Grell, to whom I give credit for most of the world law. One first of all these people, Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie, are the two men who contributed most to the development of this course. Andrew Carnegie, for having been the first to sow in me the idea of this writing, and Henry Ford, whose achievements provided me with a good part of the subject from which the course was developed. I want to express my gratitude to all these men for the services rendered, because without them, this course would never have existed. Personal encounters with the majority of them allowed me to collect comments related to their philosophy personally. Close to them to develop this course on the laws of success constitutes in itself a sufficient remuneration for the work done. These men have been the backbone, the foundation and sharp end of the financial policy of the industry and the business world of the United States. The course for the laws of success is a summary of the philosophy and rules of procedure that led these powerful men to excel in the field they had chosen to deploy their efforts. My intention was to present this course in a clear and simple language so that it can be accessible and mastered by very young men and women still studying, with the exception of the psychological law described under the name of organizing genius or collective brain. I do not claim to have created anything fundamentally new in this course. I have the benefit of to have grouped together ancient truths and known laws in a practical form, so that it can be correctly interpreted and applied by the average person whose needs require a simple philosophy. By reviewing the merits of the book, The Laws of Success, Judge Elbert Harris said, "Two salient points related to this philosophy impresses me the most. The first is the simplicity of its presentation, and the second is the fact that its precision is so obvious that it will be accepted immediately. I would warn you to avoid issuing a judgment before having listened to all the laws. This applies especially to this introduction, in which it was necessary to include brief references concerning subjects of a more or less technical and scientific nature, whose reason will appear obvious to you after listening to the laws. By beginning this listening with an open mind and keeping this attitude until the last law, you will be abundantly rewarded by a wider and more faithful vision of the life. Napoleon H. Time is a master of work that heals the wounds caused by the temporary defect, inequalities, and redresses the injustices of the world. there is nothing impossible with time. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the new books. Law Brain. Introduction to the Genius Organizer or Collective. You can do it if you believe in it. This book is a course about the essential principles of success. Success is above all a question of personality adjustment that will constantly have to confront different and changing environments while trying to maintain a spirit of harmony and balance. This harmony is based on the understanding of the forces constituting the environment of an individual. This course is intended as a roadmap that can be followed to lead directly to success because it will help you to understand and maximize its forces determined by the circumstances of life. Before starting to listen to the book, The Laws of Success, you should know its history. You should know exactly what this course promises to those who follow it. Until they have assimilated the laws and principles on which it is established. You should also know its limits as well as its possibilities, and consider it as an aid in your struggle to find your place in the world. From the point of view of entertainment, my course, The Laws of Success, would only get a poor second place compared to most attractive monthly newspapers that abound in the kiosks. Comment: It has been said that Napoleon Hill and his philosophy on success have made more people millions than any other person in history. It can also be said that Napoleon Hill inspired more motivational experts than any other person. Napoleon Hill, more than 30 years after his death, continues to be the most influential motivational author in America. This evidence is partly due to the fact that he was at the forefront of the ARE of communications as we know them today, and it is due in large part to the diligence he applied to the research from which he established his principles included in the Laws of Success. It is almost impossible not to find a speaker who does not use some excerpt of Mr. Hill's work. His influence, perhaps recognized in the writings of his fathers, including Dale Carnegie and Norman Vincent later, piles several authors and lecturers, to renown such as W. Clement Stone, Agog Mondino, Earl Nightingale, but the author of The Chicken Broth for the Soul, Mark Victor Hessen, worked directly either with Napoleon Hill himself or the Napoleon Hill Foundation. The principles of Monsieur Hill can be found in books as diverse as Jose Silva, Marie K.H., Dr. Maxwell Maltz, Shakti Gawain, Wally Famous Amos, and Dr. Bernie Siegel. Anthony Robbins, without a doubt the most popular speaker of our modern times, has often quoted Napoleon Hill as his inspiration, and one can find him in the book The Key Habits of Effective People by best-selling author Stephen Covey. The principles about which Mr. H has written now more than 70 years ago a review. This course has been created for any serious person who wants to dedicate part of his time to succeed in life. I did not attempt to compete with those who write for the sole purpose of entertaining. During its preparation, I aimed a dual objective: first, to help you find your weaknesses, and then allow you to design a clearly defined plan to fill your gaps. The most successful men and women had to correct some weak points of their personality before experiencing success. The most common weaknesses that hinder success in both women and men are intolerance, doubt, vandalism, selfishness, complacency, the tendency to reap where they have not sown, and the habit of spending more than they have earned. All these common enemies of humanity, and many others, are covered by the laws of success, so that any person of average intelligence can master them with a minimum of effort or inconvenience. You should know from the outset that this course has long since passed the experimental stage. It already carries to its credit a record of realization worthy of reflection and serious analysis. You should also know that it was examined and approved by some of the most pragmatic minds of this generation. Conferences, The Laws of Success. I first used this course for a few years to give lectures across the country. At that time, I had assistants in the audience to interpret people's reactions, which allowed me to better measure my analyses with a view to making changes. I won my first big victory when I used my lecture as the basis of a course to train 3,000 men and women, inexperienced in the field of sales. Thanks to this training, spread over a period of 6 months. They managed to win more than $1 million, and they have paid my services for an amount of $30,000. The individuals and small groups of vendors who have achieved success through this course are too many to be enumerated, but their number is eloquent and the benefits incurred extremely conclusive. The philosophy, the laws of success, was brought to the attention of Mr. Don Mallet, the former editor of the Township O Daily News, who associated with me. He was preparing to resign as editor of the newspaper and take over the management of my affairs when he was assassinated on July 16, 1926. Before his death, Mr. Mallet had concluded arrangements with Mr. Justice Elbert Calgary, then chairman of the board of directors of the United States Steel Corporation, to present my course to each employee of the company at a total cost of about $10,000. This project did not come about because of the death of Mr. Justice Gary, but the enormous sums he had wanted to invest showed the interest and the faith he had placed in the relevance and correctness of this course. The terminology this introduction presents a few technical terms which may disturb you at first, but do not mind, because they will become clearer as you listen. This introduction is intended only to give you a background for the other lessons to come. You should listen to it several times, because each listening will deepen the understanding. You will find a description of the new law of psychology, which is the real basis of all the personal achievements that go out of the ordinary. I consider this law as the organizing genius or collective brain, that is the spirit that develops through the harmonious cooperation of two or more people who join in the aim of accomplishing a given work. If you are in the sale, you can take advantage of this law of the organizing genius in your daily work. Experience has shown that a group of 6 or its sellers can use the law so effectively that their sales can grow considerably. As paradoxical as it may seem, life insurance is the most difficult product to sell. Yet a small group of men in the service of the insurance company, the Prudential of America, whose sales are generally composed of small policies, formed an informal group in order to experiment the law of organizing engineering. It resulted in an increase in sales for each member of the group, equivalent to triple the usual yield. What a small group of intelligent life insurance sellers managed to do by applying the law of organizing engineering is nothing compared to what a more optimistic and inventive person could realize. This can equally well apply to other groups of sellers engaged in the sale of goods or other services more tangible than life insurance. It is likely that this first chapter can already give you enough understanding of the laws of success to change the course of your life. Comment. Listening to this book, you will occasionally encounter a term such as organizing genius or collective brain that has, over the years since Napoleon Hill created this term, taken a connotation that did not reflect his attention. He initially published his work in 1928, at a time when Fredo Jung developed further study on human psychology and terminology of Mr. H was not commonly used definition psychological, now accepted, which comes closest to thinking of what the term organizing genius created by Napoleon Hill meant, was a theory that Jung called collective unconsciousness. But what Mr. Hill described went far beyond Jung's theory. It included other concepts, such as Edward de Bono's techniques on lateral thinking and brainstorming, and several other ideas behind the modern management of all the buzzwords, such as synergy, quality, and coming out of the box. The term organizing genius may seem old-fashioned to modern listeners, but if one takes into account all the catchwords that are now part of the vocabulary daily, there is no other term that encompasses everything that Mr. He had in mind: personalities. It is the people working behind a commercial business that determines the measure of success that it will enjoy. Enhance their personality in order to make them more attractive. For customers, and the business will be even more prosperous. You can buy the same goods at a comparable price in several stores, but there will always be one that does better business than others, because of its excellent management of people who come in contact with customers. People buy as much or even more the quality of contact than the goods. comment there is no doubt that Mr. Hill was prophet as to the description of his work, because the what he said about the importance of a person's personality and the service that he can offer was a precursor to the service industry, which at the end of the 20th century dominated the economy. The service life insurance was so confined to a technical basis that the cost of protection does not vary much from one company to another. Yet among the hundreds of companies offering the same product, there are at most a dozen to hold the monopoly of business. It is so because of the personality of the sellers. 99% of people buy an insurance policy without worrying about what it contains. They actually buy it is the kind personality of a person who knows the value of cultivating such contact. Your goal in life, or at least a significant part, is to achieve success as defined through the laws of success. It is to achieve your clearly defined goal without violating the rights of others. Whatever your goal is, you will achieve it more easily when you have learned to cultivate a friendly personality, as well as the delicate art of collaborating with others in a given company, and this without disagreement or jealousy. No one has the opportunity to enjoy permanent success until he has seen in a mirror the cause real of all these mistakes. Napoleon H. One of the biggest problems of life, if not the biggest, is that of learning the art of harmonious negotiation. This course was created with the aim of teaching people how to progress in balance and free harmony of the destructive effects of disagreements that put millions of people into misery every year, need, and bankruptcy. Thanks to the enunciation of the objective of the course, you can approach the following lessons with the feeling that a complete transformation is about to manifest itself in your personality. You can enjoy a marked success in life without the power, and you can never enjoy the benefit of the course power without a personality strong enough to influence others to cooperate with you in a spirit of harmony. Each step of this course will tell you how to develop such a personality. When you have mastered these laws and integrated them into your life, within a period of 15 to 30 weeks, you will be ready to develop sufficient personal power to be sure to achieve your clearly defined goal. The objective of these laws is to help you develop and combine the knowledge you already possess, as well as those you will acquire, so that you can turn them into power. You would be better to listen to this book with a notebook and pen to carry hand in order to note the ideas that inevitably will come. As you listen, they will inspire you about methods and means to be taken concerning the use of these laws to serve your interests. You should also share the knowledge of these laws with those who are dear to you, which will strengthen your understanding of the subject. In addition to doing them a service, a parent can set his laws so indelibly in the mind of these children that this teaching will completely change the course of their life. The spouses should make this learning together for reasons that will become evident before the end of this introduction. Power is one of the three fundamental objectives of the human effort, and it is divided into two categories. The one that develops through the coordination of the natural physical laws, and the one that does it by combining and classifying knowledge. The power derived from organized knowledge is the most important because it offers an instrument for its transformation and its rooting to the use of another form of power. The object of this course, and to indicate you the safe route to take to collect the facts that you wish to introduce into your knowledge system. There are two interesting methods to accumulate knowledge. 1. Study. Classify and assimilate facts organized by others or to proceed by personal experience, by establishing your own process of collection, organization, and classification of facts. This law deals mainly with methods and means of study. Study facts and data assembled and classified by others. If you want to malign someone, do not say it, but write it in the sand at the edge of the water. Napoleon H., the organizing genius and the structure of the universe. Over the last centuries, scientists have identified and cataloged the physical elements that comprise all the material forms of the universe. Comment below. The author explains the basic laws of physics as they were understood in his time. They contain errors that come from his misunderstanding, and these will be identified even by neophytes of the laws of physics. Mr. H, for example, and puts the opinion that electrons can be positive or negative. An electron, as we know it today, still contains a negative charge. There is a branch of physics that studies much smaller particles than the electron, a world of which Mr. Hill had no idea, where Mr. Hill deviates from the subject to discuss specific things. Small parts of the text were deleted. Mr. H would not have mentioned them if he had had a better knowledge of the subject. Nevertheless, it is important to read the broad lines of his description of physical matter as a metaphor or comparison about the laws governing human behavior. That is, moreover, the way he would have wanted the reader to understand this segment. Mr. Hill tried to find a relationship on a basis of physics to explain the collective, this extremely mysterious and yet unquestionable power. By study, analysis, and exact measurement, man discovered the physical size of the universe, consisting of sun, of stars, and planets, some of which are 10 million times larger than the small Earth on which he lives. Paradoxically, man discovered the smallness of the physical forms that make up the universe by reducing the 80 physical elements into molecules and atoms to reach the smallest particle, the electron, that is invisible to the naked eye. It is a center of positive or negative force that constitutes the origin of any physical element. Molecules and electrons, to understand both the detail and perspective of the process through which knowledge is gathered, organized, and classified, it seems essential to start with the smallest and simplest particles of physical matter, because they are the ABC which allowed nature to build the whole framework of the physical part of the universe. The molecules are composed of small, invisible particles of matter, constantly rotating at the speed of light, according to the same principle of the Earth revolutionizing around the Sun. These particles of matter, called atoms, which rotate in a continuous circuit in the sound molecule, are composed of electrons, the smallest particles of physical matter. As I said previously, the electron is only in two forms of force, positive or negative. It is uniform, has only one dimension and only one nature. So in a grain of sand or a drop of water, the complete principle on which the whole universe operates is reproduced. What wonder, which prodigy, become aware of the magnificence of all this the next time you eat a meal. Every the plate in which you eat, the utensils, and the table use are in the last analysis only a collection of electrons in the world of physical matter. Whether you gazed at the largest bright star in the sky or the smallest grain of sand, the object examined is only an organized collection of molecules, of atoms and electrons, in revolution around each other at an inconceivable speed. Each particle of physical matter is in a permanent state of extremely agitated motion. Nothing is immobile, even if it may seem to the naked eye. There is no solid physical matter. The harnessed piece of steel is only an organized mass of molecules, of atoms and electrons in revolution. Much more, the electrons of the piece of steel are of the same nature and move at the same speed as the electrons agitating in gold, silver, copper, or dye them. The forms of physical matter appear different, one of the other, and they are because they are composed of heterogeneous combinations of atoms. Even if in these atoms the electrons are always the same, some are positive and others negative. That is to say that some carry a positive electric charge while others carry a negative charge. Thanks to the science of chemistry, the material can be fractionated into atoms which are invariable. The elements are created by the combination and the change of position of the atoms, so it can be realized that the physical elements of the universe differ from one another only by their number of electrons, which make up their atoms, and by the number and composition of these atoms in the molecules of each element. For example, a mercury atom contains 80 electron positive charges in its nucleus and 80 peripheral negative charges. If chemists could eliminate 2 of its positive electrons, it would instantly become the metal known as platinum. If the chemist could then go further, it could transform platinum into gold. The formula by which this electronic modification could be produced has been the subject of constant research by alchemists for centuries and continues with modern chemists. All these scientists know that thousands of synthetic substances can only be made of 4 kinds of hydrogen atoms: oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. Therefore, the atom is the universal particle with which nature builds all the material forms of the grain of sand, the largest shining star in space. The atom is the cornerstone of nature, with which it builds a chain or a loaf, a rock of grays or granite, a mouse or an elephant. Don't be afraid of a little opposition. Remember that the circle of success usually rises against the wind of adversity, and not with it. Napoleon Hill makes us understand here that the universe is filled with invisible energy untapped. It is the energy that was later demonstrated through the explosion of the first atomic bomb. But the essence of this message is that around a cluster of matter there is a whirlwind of energy. This energy determines that something attracts or repels something. The nature of this energy can allow 2 hydrogen atoms to attach to an oxygen atom to thus form a molecule of water, or sodium and a chloride atom to create a molecule of salt. The nuclei of the atoms never change, but the atoms themselves are joined into something new due to the nature of their energy in a group of collective brains. Genius organizing the energy of the spirits of individuals surrounds the people of the group. Their individual energies interact, and what results is something new and different. These facts concerning the smallest analyzable particles of the group matter is the starting point for teaching you how to develop and apply the law of power. The vibratory fluid of matter. It has been noted that all matter is in constant state of vibration and motion. That each molecule is composed of moving particles called atoms, which in turn are composed of active particles called electrons. A certain degree of vibration speed of this fluid energy causes sound. The human ear can only detect it if it is produced by a vibration of about 20 to 2,000 cycles per second. When this number is greater than sound, the cycles manifest themselves in the form of heat. This phenomenon is used in ever higher microwave ovens. In the scale, vibrations or cycles are recorded in the form of light, even if the ultraviolet rays are normally invisible, as well as the energy having a wavelength of a higher order than the ultraviolet. They can cause a lightning effect on physical objects. Science still probes its upper limits to discover the mysteries at an even higher level in the scale. I would be inclined to believe that the vibrations or cycle creates the power, which generates the thought of the human being. In my opinion, the fluid part of any vibration from which all known forms of energy and of universal nature arise. I think that the fluid part of light thus differs from sound only by speed of its vibration, and that the fluid part of the thought is, except for its frequency, exactly the same as for sound, heat, and light. Just as there is only one form of physical matter from which the Earth, all other planets, the sun and stars are composed, but there is therefore only one form of energy that keeps all matter in a constant state of rapid motion. I want to quote here Dr. Alexander Graham, the inventor of the long-distance telephone and one of the recognized authorities in the field of vibratory fields, to support the theories I put forward on the subject of vibration. Let's suppose you have the power to make a stem vibrate doing at a given frequency in a dark chamber at the beginning. While its vibration is slow, its movement will be indicated by a single direction, that of the touch. As soon as the vibrations increase, a deep sound will come out, urging a second direction, to about 32,000 vibrations at the second. Sound will become sharp, but at 40,000 vibrations it will be the total silence, and the movements of the rod will no longer be perceived by the touch. These movements will not be perceived by any normal human direction. From this point until 1,500,000 vibrations per second, no direction can capture any effect of the vibrations that occurred after having reached at this level. The movement is indicated only by an increase in temperature, and then by the sight when the stem becomes red, heated to 3 million vibrations. The power diffuses a violet light, then ultraviolet rays and other invisible radiations, some of which can be lost by instruments and used by humans. It occurred to me that there was a lot to learn about the effect of these vibrations, considering the large interval where ordinary human senses are unable to hear, to see, or feel the movement. The power necessary to send messages wirelessly by the vibrations of the earth is in this interval, but it is so large that it seems to me to contain even more of possibilities. But you have to invent devices, and who creates new sounds like wireless instruments do you a greater service than the one for which you are paid, and you will soon be paid more than the value of the service. You render the law of increased revenue works in this way. When I think about this long interval, I think that there must surely be other forms of vibration that can offer results as fascinating, if not more, than wireless waves. I believe that it is in this interval that are the vibrations emitted by our brain and nerve cells in the process of thinking. They can be located even higher in the scale beyond the vibrations that produce the ultraviolet rays. Is a wire necessary to carry these vibrations? Could not it pass through the earth without the intermediary of a wire, as is? The case for wireless waves, how would it be perceived by the receiver? Would he hear a series of signals? Or would he discover that the thoughts of one of these people have entered his brain? We can indulge in certain speculations based on what we know of wireless waves and extrapolate on the infinity of their possibilities. If the waves of thought act similarly, they must move away from the brain and circulate endlessly around our planet and the universe. The body, the skeleton, and others solid obstacles would form no opposition to their passage, since they pass through the earth that surrounds the molecules of each substance, whatever the solidity and density. You wonder about the interference with the thoughts of others, and the confidence that would result if it circulated unbeknownst to us to the master. But if it is not already so, click on the mind that I managed to liqueur in self, example of the inspiration or decency that a speaker can feel when addressing an audience. I experienced this several times without being able to. In my opinion, several recent scientific discoveries give hope that humans in the near future will be able to read the thoughts of others when they are transmitted directly from one brain to another, and this without the intervention of the word of writing or any method of communication. But it is conceivable to see a day without our eyes, to hear without our ears, and to speak without our language. The hypothesis that two brains can communicate without the intervention of the senses is based on the theory that thought or vital force is a form of electrical disturbance that can be grasped by induction and transmitted remotely, either through a wire or simply through the constant presence of the ether, as in the case of the zones of the wireless telegraph. There are several analogies which suggest that the thought is of the same nature as an electrical disturbance. An air consisting of the same substance as the brain is an excellent conductor of electric current. When an electric current has been passed through the nerves of a dead man, the chargers were confused to see him sit and move. The nerves thus electrified had produced a muscular contraction akin to life. The nerves seem to act on the muscles as does the electric current on an electromagnet. The magnet, a bar of iron placed at right angle with respect to him and them. The nerves produce by the intangible current of the vital force which circulates through them, the contraction of the muscular fibers which are arranged at right angles with respect to them. It would be possible to enumerate for good reason, starting the similarity between thought and electricity. The electric current is considered as an undulatory movement to earth them. the hypothetical substance which fills all the space and spreads in all the substances. I consider that the energy must exist, because without it, the electric current could not pass through a vacuum, and the light could not pass through the space. It is reasonable to believe that only an analogous undulatory movement can produce the phenomenon of thought and of the vital force. Thus, the brain cells would act as a battery whose current would flow along the nerves. But does this current stop there? These waves do not come out of the body to circulate around the earth, imperceptible to our senses, just as the wireless waves circulated before their existence was discovered by hers and the others. Each brain is both emitter and receiver, more frequently than I can quantify. I have proven, at least to my own satisfaction, that every human brain is both emitter and receiver. As to the frequency of thought vibrations, if this theory were confirmed by methods of scientific control, imagine the role it would play in the compilation and classification, the organization of knowledge. The possibility, much less than the probability of such a reality, shakes the mind of man. Thomas Paine was one of the great minds of the period of the American Revolution. It is perhaps to him more than to anyone else that we owe both the beginning and the happy end of the Revolution. Thanks to his keen mind, he helped to write the Declaration of Independence and persuade the signatories of the document to formulate it in realistic terms. Here is how she described the origin of her immense knowledge. Anyone who made observations on the evolution of the human mind by analyzing his own mind can only to be aware that there are two distinct classes of thought, the one that we produce by our reflection and the one that spontaneously appear in our mind. I have always made it my duty to treat these voluntary visitors with civility, taking care to examine to the extent of my skills whether it deserved me to welcome them or not. It is thanks to these spontaneous thoughts that I have acquired almost all the knowledge that I possess about the knowledge that every person learns in school. It constitutes only a small starting capital to set in motion on the long path of scholarship. Each scholar is his own teacher, because the principles cannot impregnate on their memory place of mental residence and understanding, and they are never as durable as when they begin in conception itself. This is how this great philosopher and patriot American described the experience common to each individual at some point in his life, who has not experienced this certainty, to the effect that thoughts and even complete ideas from external sources have entered their mind. What means of transmission there is for such visitors, if not the lands that fill the infinite spaces of the universe? It is the means of transmission of all known forms of vibration, such as sound, light, and heat. Why would it not be the same method for the transmission of the vibration of thought? So, if this theory is a fact, the unlimited space with which the universe is provided is now and will continue to be literally a mental library from which all thoughts released by human beings can be found. Comment. Imagine the part played by this principle in all areas of life. You have probably already experienced it with your loved ones or with a colleague of work. You are finding the solution of a problem and you arrive at the same conclusion all at the same time. You have also surely noticed that the intensity of thoughts can increase their power and thus act on other minds when you listen to a passionate speaker. Don't you sometimes feel that you know what he is about to say, even the words he will use? This can sometimes be simply due to a logical interpretation, and this can still happen when you hear someone talk about a subject about which you know very little. In such a case, you have few games to anticipate anything, and yet the power of the other person's thoughts transmits to you ideas that are explained to you. Then imagine applying this result to your pursuit of success through a harmonious and meaningful alliance of two or more minds. There are two key words in this harmonious and meaningful sentence. Each failure is a blessing disguised addiction, provided that it teaches a necessary lesson that we would not otherwise have learned. The majority of failures are only temporary defeats. Organized knowledge, I therefore unveil without further delay the foundation of one of the most important hypotheses enumerated in Law 3. This law deals with organized knowledge. most of them of which the human race became the heiress, were preserved and correctly recorded in the Bible of nature. By turning the pages of this immortal work, man was able to read the history of the terrifying struggle from which our civilization came. The pages of this great book are made up of physical elements, of which this earth and the other planets are made, and also of the land that fills all space. Listening to this work of nature, man has discovered the bones, skeletons, footprints, and other unmistakable evidence of the history of animal life on Earth, evidence deposited by Mother Nature through time to illuminate its conduct. The endless pages kept in the land where all human thought has been recorded constitute an authentic source of communication between the Creator and man, even before he has reached the stage of development of the unicellular animal amoeba. The modification of this Bible escapes the control of man because it tells its story not in dead or hieroglyphic languages, but in a universal language that all those who have eyes can read. The Bible of nature, from which the knowledge that deserves to be known has been drawn, is one that man cannot modify, nor with which he can take liberties. One of the most wonderful discoveries made by man is that of radio. Imagine the earth capturing the ordinary vibration of sound and transforming it into a radio frequency, transporting it to a suitably tuned receiving station that restores it its original form, all in the space of a second. It will not surprise anyone that such a force can capture the vibration of the sound thought and keep it moving forever. The established fact is known of the instantaneous transmission of sound by means of radio device moves the probable possible. My theory of the transmission of the vibration of thought from one mind to the other. Napoleon Hill wrote his words in 1927, a period of great optimism in America. The economy was booming, and the advancement of science, as much as in industry, was occurring so quickly that it seemed that there was nothing impossible in the eyes of some people. Needless to tell you that the communication from one mind to another did not occur during the life of Mr. Hill. However, you take this extraordinary research that was done at the beginning of the 21st century in relation to communications technologies and artificial intelligence, and you combine it all with the knowledge of DNA and the human genome, it will then seem possible, even probable, that some form of Mr. Hill's theory is the communication from one mind to another is realized the organizing genius. We now arrive at the approach by which the student can assemble, classify, and organize useful knowledge, thanks to the harmonious union of two or more spirits, from which will be born an organizing genius or collective brain. The expression organizing genius is abstract and has no counterpart in the field of known facts, except for a small number of people who have made a careful study of the effect that one mind can have on others. I searched in vain in all the textbooks dealing with the human mind, and I found nowhere the slightest reference to the principle I define as being the organizing genius. This expression had first attracted my attention in an interview with Andrew Carnegie, as will be seen in the second law, the chemistry of the mind. I believe that the mind is made of the same universal fluid energy as that of the earth, which fills the universe. We know that some spirits oppose as soon as they are in contact, while others demonstrate a natural affinity between the two. Extremes of natural antagonism and spontaneous affinity arising from the encounter or contact of the brain. There is a range of possibilities concerning the possible reactions between two spirits. Some spirits are so naturally adapted to each other that the lightning strike is instantaneous. In other cases, the spirits demonstrate such antagonism that a violent mutual aversion appears from the first encounter. These reactions occur without the slightest word or sign usually responsible for love and hatred acting as stimulus. As we have seen previously, it is almost likely that the mind is constituted of energy, and when two spirits come close enough to produce a contact, the mixture of the units of these things of the mind prepares a chemical reaction and initiates vibrations, which affect the two individuals in a pleasant or unpleasant way. The effect of the meeting of two spirits is obvious, even to the observer of passage. Each effect must have a cause, which more logical, to explain the change of mental attitude between two spirits which have only just met, than to attribute this to a disturbance of the electrons or units of each spirit, which initiates a rearrangement created by the contact, in order to fix this law on solid foundations. I wanted to demonstrate unequivocally that the contact of two spirits provokes only a certain perceptible effect or a state of mind, different from that which existed previously. For the time being, no need to know the reason for this reaction. The important thing is to know that this happens on every occasion. This known fact constitutes the starting point for demonstrating what I mean by the expression organizing genius. An organizing genius can be created by the bringing together of two or more spirits, with the aim of creating a perfect harmony of this harmonious mixture. The chemistry of the mind creates a third spirit, which can be suitable and used by one or all individual spirits. Organizing genie remains available as long as there is the harmonious and favorable agreement between the spirits. It will disintegrate and obviously, of its previous existence, will disappear as soon as the favorable agreement is broken. Comment. There is a solid parallel between what the author expresses here about the interrelation of the minds and theories of the revolutionary scientific philosopher, inventor and designer Buckminster Fuller. In the introduction of his book Synergetics Color, written, humanity was deprived of a detailed understanding. Specialization brought with it feelings of futility and confusion in individuals. Mr. Hill believed that members of a collective brain should distance themselves from their respective profession to form a larger group than each macrocosmally fooling individual, said that we must understand all elements and operations of the universe as being interconnected. In his book Synergetics 330.0, Fuller defines the universe in this way: the historically integral, synchronized, comprehensive system, total joining with all the total integral parts system, consciously grasped by men and communicating to themselves and to other people in a non-simultaneous and non-identical way, although always complementary and only partially overlapped. Macro, micro, always and everywhere physical and metaphysical in sequence of events, mesura and not mesura. The universe is a dynamically synchronized scenario, the meeting of minds. This principle of chemistry of the mind is the basis and cause of almost all so-called case of amateur and eternal triangles, many of which unfortunately are victims of divorce or mockery. This great law of nature is in disrepute, often generates evil remarks. We are not unaware that the first 2 or 3 years of a union are often marked by many disagreements, more or less important, because they are years of adjustment. If the relationship survives, the permanent agreement is almost assured. This is another case where the effect is perceived without understanding the cause. Although other factors may intervene, the lack of harmony of the first years of a union is mainly due to the slow chemistry of the minds to harmonize. In other words, the electrons or the units of energy which define the mind are rarely at their peak at first contact. A stable union favors their gradual adaptation, except in the rare cases which evolve towards mutual hostility. Normally, after a common life of 10 years, the spouses become practically indispensable to each other. Even if the slightest evidence of the state of mind called love cannot be detected, their intimacy develops not only a natural affinity between the two spirits, but sometimes causes them to adopt similar facial expressions or other types of likeness. A specialist of human behavior can easily recognize the spouse in a group of strangers. After having been presented to the bride, the gaze, the outline of the face, and the timbre of the voice of the couples for a long time unite strangely, resemble each other. The effect of the chemistry of the human mind is so powerful that any experienced speaker can quickly interpret the way his words are accepted by his audience. The antagonism present in the mind of only one person among 1,000 can be quickly detected by the speaker, who has learned to feel and record this kind of effect. Much more, the wise speaker can perceive his interpretations without seeing the expression of faces. An audience can therefore propel him to the top of his oratory or her, to embarrass him to the point of total fiasco, and this without involving the slightest sound or the slightest physical expression. Any master seller knows the psychological moment when the conclusion of the agreement occurs. He perceives this moment not by the words of the prospective buyer, but by the effect of the chemistry of his mind as interpreted or felt by the seller. The words often dismantle the intentions of those he emits them, but a correct interpretation of the chemistry of the mind allows no slippage. Each competent seller knows that the majority of buyers tend to adopt a negative attitude up to the culmination of a sale. Thanks to the chemistry of the mind, a skilled lawyer has developed a sixth sense, allowing him to detect and interpret what is unfolding in the mind of the witness, beyond the misleading words that he professes skillfully. Several lawyers have developed this ability without knowing the true source, mastering the technique without the scientific understanding on which it is based. Several sellers act the same. One who possesses the ability to correctly interpret the chemistry of the mind of others acts as if he could enter through the front door of the house of a given mind, explore the places at leisure, note all the desired details, but emerge rich of a complete image without the owner knowing that he received a visitor. Now that you know the concept of the chemistry of the mind, you know that a perceptible mental change occurs at the moment when two minds come together, and they register either an antagonistic or benevolent reaction. Each mind possesses what could be called an electric field whose nature varies according to the disposition of the mind concerned and the nature of the chemistry of the mind that creates the field. I believe that the normal or natural condition of the chemistry of the mind of every individual is the result of its physical heredity joined to the nature of its dominant thoughts. Each mind is in constant evolution until the day when its philosophy and its usual way of thinking transforms the chemistry of its mind. I have the deep conviction that any individual can voluntarily change the chemistry of his mind so that he will attract or repel the people with whom he will come into contact. In other words, you can adopt a mental attitude that will attract and please people, or an attitude that will repel and awaken their antagonism. And this, the idea of word of physiognomy, games, or other body movements, now returns to the definition of an organizing genius, a spirit, that arises from the union and the coordination of two or more spirits in a spirit of perfect harmony. And you will understand the full meaning of the word harmony, in the sense that it is used here. Two spirits will unite or coordinate only if the element of perfect har is present. That is where lies the secret of the success or failure of just about any company or association. Any sales manager, military commander, or other leader understands the need for a spirit of group, a spirit of common understanding and cooperation in the pursuit of success. This harmonious, collective spirit converging towards the objective is obtained by the voluntary discipline or forced that spirits unite into an organizing genius. The chemistry of each spirit is modified in such a way that it unites and functions as if it were a single spirit. The methods to create such a process of fusion are as numerous as individuals engaged in different forms of leadership. Each leader has his own method of coordinating partisan minds. One will use force, the other persuasion. One day on the fear of punishment, the other on the rewards aimed at bringing each mind back to this harmonious commonplace of meeting the different fields of political, economic, and financial science abound with examples illustrating the technique used by their leaders to promote this union of mind in their members. The great leaders of history have, however, been endowed by nature with a chemical combination of mind favorable to the attraction of other minds. Napoleon is a notorious example. He possessed the type of mind, magnetic, that allowed him to attract all the spirits that he knew. It was for that reason that his soldiers followed him to a certain death without flinching. This extended to the inspiring and stimulating nature of his personality, and the latter was no more nor less than the transfer of the chemistry of his mind. The fact of believing in heroism gives birth to heroes of Israeli comment. Napoleon Hill here creates his own definition and explanation about the charisma word, which originally meant a kind of religious power or leadership that made some individuals unusually magnetic. The subject fascinated religious and political historians, psychologists, other social scientists, for several years, 100 years after his death, due to the influence that he seemed to exert on the people around him. Bonaparte was a perfect example of charismatic leader. When Napoleon Hill initially wrote The Laws of Success, Napoleon Bonaparte aroused the same interest in people that Hitler today induces him. The creation of a collective brain. No group can attain the harmony of an organizing genius if only one of its members possesses a negative and antipathetic spirit, because positive spirits will not be able to unite with him. Ignorance of this fact led many otherwise qualified leaders to any skillful leader who grasps this principle of the chemistry of the mind can harmoniously unite the minds of almost any group, but this harmony will be temporary and will disintegrate as soon as the leader leaves the group. Why do the most successful selling groups meet at least once a week in order to amalgamate the individual minds into an organizing genius, which for a limited number of days will serve as a stimulus to other minds? It is possible, and it is generally the case, that the leaders of these groups do not always understand what happens at the level of the minds during these meetings. They are usually devoted to talks led by the leader and other members of the group, and occasionally by an outside guest. It is during these exchanges that the spirits contact each other and mutually recharge the brain of a human being, perhaps compared to an electric battery, because it exhausts or discharges itself, leaving him desperate to discourage and emptied of his spirits. What is the happy mortal who has never felt this in such a state of exhaustion? The human brain must be recharged by the contact of one or more spirits having more vitality. You do not believe in cooperation. Look what happens to a car when it loses a wheel. Comment: much of the New Age thinking and the study of the practices of philosophy and religion in Asia have created a number of unknown ways to recharge the mind. Yoga, meditation of various forms of prayer, spinning, and other techniques, all there adept. The last part of the 20th century has also witnessed an incredible interest in movements of personal growth or human potential. This tendency to give free rein to an incalculable number of course books on CD and DVD, and every week, thousands of people pay to attend seminars, conferences, and congresses to hear motivational speakers or leaders, providing them with inspiration to improve certain aspects of their lives. Some experts have denigrated the long-term effects of such a technique by describing the people who attend these seminars as addicts who need a new guru every week to motivate themselves. Mr. H would not have accepted such cynical comments because he was aware that it was a perfectly logical aspect of human nature, sexuality, and the collective brain. You possess a major asset if you understand the importance of getting in periodic contact with a more vigorous mind to maintain your vivified or recharged mind. Sexual contact is one of the most effective stimulants to recharge a person's mind, provided that the contact is made intelligently between two people experiencing a real affection. Any other form of sexual relationship causes a weakening of mind. Any psychotherapist competent to recharge an Anel Braina. Few minutes before finishing this brief reference to sexual contact as a means of revitalizing an exhausted mind, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that all great leaders, whatever their origins and their education, have a very pronounced sexual nature. Comment: Mr. Hill's position towards the relationship between sexuality and creativity is complex, and it changes several times during his life. While he recommends the union between a man and a woman, he does not seem very inclined to recommend that the leaders of Thread integrate women into their collective brain group. In more recent works, such as Think and Become Rich, it alters its position, and it recommends the sublimation of sexual energy. The factor creating such opinion surely comes from the fact that its audiences were all male. In a practical way, the business climate of the 1920s and 1930s did not encourage independent achievement by women in the original version of the book, The Laws of Success. Most of the examples come from men, and references to human potential are always written to the male gender. For example, it cites what a man can or cannot do. Several psychologists and medical researchers believe that all diseases occur when brain faculties are impaired or exhausted. A person with a vivified brain would be practically, if not entirely, immune to any form of disease. Any wise health practitioner knows that nature, where the mind cures the disease. Every time a cure is performed, drugs, faith, hand-laying, chiropractic, osteopathy, and all other forms of external stimulation are nothing more than aids to nature. In fact, all these means only move the mind chemistry until it readjusts the body's cells and tissues, generates the brain acting so that the human body functions in a normal way. Most conventional practitioners will admit the truth of this statement. What are then the possibilities of future development in the field of the chemistry of the mind? Thanks to the principle of the harmonious union of the spirits, we can enjoy perfect health. This same principle can be applied to allow us to develop sufficient power to solve the problem of the financial pressure which constantly weighs on each of us. We can extrapolate the future possibilities of the chemistry of the mind by making an inventory of its past achievements while considering the fact that these successes were in most cases only the fruit of accidental discoveries and mind advancement resulting from a happy coincidence. Commentary. News programs on television and popular magazine put into V stories about the crucial role that the mind plays in helping the immune system heal the body of the people. Techniques for using the healing powers of the mind are now taught in most medical schools and are the basis of best book from Dr. Kokar Simonton Louise to Dr. Bernie Siegel, Kendwald, Dr. Deepak Skopran, and Dr. Andrew Veal, to mention only some of the most prominent authors of the chemistry of the mind and economic power. The chemistry of the mind can be applied with relevance to the daily affairs of the economic and commercial fields, and is a state of affairs easy to prove, thanks to the perfect harmony resulting from the union of two or more minds. The principle of the chemistry of the mind can generate sufficient power to make individuals whose mind have merged capable of accomplishing seemingly superhuman tricks of force. Power is the force with which human beings succeed any enterprise. The power existing in unlimited quantity can benefit any group of people who possess the wisdom to extract their own personality and their immediate and personal interests, infusion their minds in a spirit of perfect harmony. Observe to your greatest advantage the frequency of the word harmony throughout this first lesson. No organizing genius can be developed where this element of perfect harmony is lacking. It is impossible for one mind to merge with another mind until both minds have been awakened and stimulated in a spirit of spirit. Perfect harmony of intent, as soon as the two minds turn to divergent paths of interest. The individual units of each mind separate, and the third element resulting from the benevolent or harmonious union, that is to say, the organizing genius, will disintegrate. Commentary before listening to the next. Comments about Thorne, Edison, and Firestone. It is again imperative to note that Mr. Hill wrote this book long before several great American fortunes were created. Long before also several industries and commerce that play a role in our contemporary life was conceived. Mr. Hill wrote at a time when the possibility of an aeronautical industry was that it was early days and the entertainment industries, including the major Hollywood studios, Music and TV networks were still waiting for the inventions that made them possible. IBM and the aeronautics industry did not exist, and the revolution of the computer and the internet was unimaginable. While this revised edition is ready for publication 2004, it seems somewhat anachronistic to imagine three of the most powerful leaders in the business world coming together to exchange ideas. Nowadays, instead of Ford, Firestone, and Edison, it would be a group consisting of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Michael Dale, as interesting as could be. The idea of such a meeting, it is difficult to imagine a meeting in perfect harmony, and if it were the case, it could well violate half a dozen antitrust laws. Notwithstanding antitrust laws, there are more modern than necessary examples of the collective brain in action. What other term would you qualify the unification of Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen, who created DreamWorks, and who has not heard of the classic example of Wozniak and Jobs gathered in a garage, defining the bases of the first Apple computer that launched the computer revolution, examples of the chemistry of the mind in action. Now let's look at the achievements of some well-known men who have accumulated great power and also great fortunes through the application of the chemistry of the mind. Let us begin our study with three men recognized as great directors in their respective fields of business, economics, and professional effort: Henry Ford, Thomas A. Edison, and Harvey S. Firestone. Among these three entrepreneurs, Henry Ford is by far the most powerful because he was affiliated with economic and financial forces. Several observers believe, in fact, that he was the most powerful of all times because he was smarter than the financial cartel of the United States. He collected the millions with as much ease as a child filled his sand-hop the beach. His relatives claimed that if necessary, he could send a request for money to raise $1 billion and have it in his pocket in less than a week. He did it with the same casual attitude as if it were the amount of a monthly rent for a middle-income person. He managed to get all this money thanks to the intelligent application of the principles on which his course is based, whereas the new Auto Ford was only at the stage of perfection in 1927. It is said that he received orders, accompanied by payment, for more than 375,000 cars if the estimated cost is calculated at $600 a unit. This totaled the sum of $225 million he received before making any delivery. Such was the power of the trust that people placed in the abilities of Ford. Thomas Edison was a philosopher, a scientist and an inventor, and perhaps the hardest-working Bible student of nature. He possessed such knowledge that he had gathered and ranked by group for the good of mankind more laws of nature than anyone before him. It was he who favored the meeting of a needle tip and a wax disc, on one rotating in such a way that the vibration of the human voice could be recorded and reproduced by the speaking machine. That was the C. Edison phonograph, which was the first to master electricity and to put it at the service of light for the use of man, using the incandescent electric lamp. It was also he who created cinema. These are only some of these achievements, these modern miracles that he accomplished under the guise of science and not under the false pretense of superhuman power, sold all the so-called miracles described in the fictional books. Firestone was the soul of the great Firestone tire industry in Macron, Ohio. These industrial achievements are so well known in the field of transportation that no further comment seems necessary. These three men all started their professional life without financial capital and with little education, yet they became well-educated and powerful. Consider now the source of their prosperity and power, because so far we have seen only the effects. The true philosopher desires to understand the cause of a given effect. Ford, Edison, and Firestone were intimate friends for several years. They used to retire in the woods once a year for a gaga period of rest, of meditation and recovery, to my notice. But perhaps without them being aware, there was a harmonious bond between them which favored the union of their minds into an organizing genius which was the real source of the power of each one. This collective brain derived from the coordination of the minds of Ford, Edison, and Firestone, made these men capable of listening to influences and sources of knowledge to which the ordinary mortals had no access. If you doubt the principle or the effects of sit, the effect speaks the same. We know that these three men were endowed with great power, that they were prosperous, that they have their career without capital and with little education. Their minds were accustomed to periodic contact, that they were favorably disposed towards each other. Their achievements are so out of the ordinary that any comparison proves unnecessary. They worked with natural laws, of laws recognized by economists and scientists, except perhaps the law on which is based the chemistry of the mind, which was not yet sufficiently developed to be classified by men of sciences in their repertoire of law. An organizing genius can be created by any group of two people and more, wishing to coordinate their minds in an intention of perfect harmony. The more conclusive results appear when it is the union of six or its mimes. Some think that Christ knows it was the principle of the chemistry of the Spirit, and that these seemingly miraculous feats were born from the power he developed through the union of the spirits of his 12 apostles. When one of the apostles, Judas Iscariot, denied his faith, the organizing genius immediately disintegrated, triggering the sequence of the disturbing events we know. Comment an example on the other side is Adolf Hitler, whose ability to keep the minds of his people in bondage allowed him to dominate Europe, terrify the world, and commit countless crimes against humanity. His immoral use, the collective brain, was defeated by an even stronger organizing genius, by which Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill united their people in a valiant effort. Interestingly enough, in the United States, several people opposed going to war against Hitler and his allies. President Roosevelt, however, applied several principles of the laws of success to persuade the public of the necessity and righteousness of such a project. The great leaders really have the opportunity to create harmony where it does not exist. Perished with him, all the collective brains do not change the course of history, but they can offer important and valuable contributions. At a time when it was unusual for women to start businesses, Mary K.H. invested all her savings to develop and market a cosmetic line to succeed her adventure. She created an organizing genius with women who sold her products by. Because there were so many closed doors to the success of women in those times, she realized that offering an opportunity to her representatives that no one else offered, she rose to the challenge by working hard for herself and for her, made a myriad of most visible awards of distinction, being the famous pink Cadillac. Nowadays, thanks to a powerful collective brain, more than 200,000 women worldwide sell cosmetics. Merit courage is the army pur of the soul that preserves it from the conquest of plunder and slavery. Henry Van Dyke. When two or more members of a group harmonize their minds to realize a collective brain, each enjoys the power to contact and collect knowledge through the subconscious of the other members of the group. This power becomes immediately perceptible because it has the effect of stimulating the mind to a higher level of vibration, which results in the appearance of a sixth sense through which new ideas will emerge. These ideas are molded to the nature and form of the subject dominating the mind of the individual. If the group met to discuss a given subject, the referent ideas will flow in the mind of the members present, as if an external influence dictated them. The spirits of the members participating in the organizing genius act as magnets, attracting stimuli of ideas and thoughts of a very organized and practical nature. Coming from nowhere, the process of the union of spirits, as I describe it, in terms of organizing genius, can compare to the action of one who would connect several electric batteries to a single transmission cable, which would have the effect of multiplying the power circulating on the line. Each battery added would increase the power of the current, proportionally to the sum of energy it transports. The same phenomenon occurs during the union of the spirits of a group to form an organizing genius. Thanks to the principle of the chemistry of the spirit, each stimulates all the other spirits of the group until the energy of the spirit reaches a peak, allowing it to penetrate and connect to the universal energy, the lands which contact in return each atom of the universe, the process. The sound vibrations multiply as they pass through the powerful broadcasting stations and are then collected by the much higher vibratory energy of the TER and transported in all directions. An organizing genius formed of several united spirits having the capacity to produce a strong vibratory energy constitutes almost exactly a counterpart of the radio transmitter. Any experienced speaker has already felt the influence of the chemistry of the impression mind when each listener tunes to the unison with its vibrations. He then feels a perceptible increase of enthusiasm, which often allows him to reach oratory heights that surprise the audience. The first 5 to 10 minutes of an address are usually devoted to the period commonly called warming. This is the process by which the spirits of the speaker and the audiences unite in a spirit of perfect harmony. Every speaker knows what happens when this state of perfect harmony does not manifest itself for all of his audience. The so-called supernatural phenomenon that occurs in so-called spiritualist encounters is the result of the reaction of the spirits present. These phenomena rarely manifest themselves at the beginning of the encounter, because 10 to 20 minutes are necessary for a group before their spirits can harmonize or unite. The messages received by the members of a spiritualist group probably come from one of the following two sources, or both at the same time. Namely, from the vast wealth of information of the subconscious of certain members of the group, of the universal mine of intention of the lands, where is probably preserved all the vibrations of thought. No known natural law, nor any human motivation, encourages the theory of communication with the dead, but each has the possibility to explore the reserve of knowledge of the mind of others. Thanks to this principle of chemistry of the mind, it is possible that this power can extend and include contact with any etheric vibration. If there is matter and the energetics, the two known elements of the universe can be transferred but cannot be created or destroyed. The theory that all the highest and most refined vibrations, such as those arising from thought, are preserved in the earth, is based on the known fact that neither matter nor energy, the two known elements of the universe, can be created or destroyed. It is reasonable to assume that all vibrations that have been intensified enough to be and absorbed in the earth will perpetuate forever. The lower vibrations that do not unite or contact the earth probably live a certain period of time before extinguishing. All the so-called vibrations knees probably gained their reputation through their fortuitous union with other minds that allowed them to intensify the vibrations of their own mind, which allowed them to contact the vast temple of recorded and classified knowledge in the lands of the universe, further investigating to find the source of the financial power that manifests itself in the achievements of the business people. I looked at a group of Chicago called the Big Six, consisting of William Riley Jr., owner of the chewing gum factory bearing his name and whose annual personal income is said to exceed the $15 million. John Eyre Thompson, who operated the Cassaccord chain of the same name. Albert Lasker, owner of the Lord and Thomas Advertising Agency. Charles P. Koch, owner of the Parmali Express Company, the largest transport company in America, and William Sarek and William Johns and Hers, who shared ownership of the Yellow Taxicab operation. A reliable financial company estimated the annual income of these 6 men at more than $25 million, an annual average of about $4 million for each. The analysis reveals that none of them had benefited from a special education, but they had all started their careers without capital or high credit. Their financial achievement was due to their personal approach and not a happy coincidence. The wheel of luck, These 6 men formed a friendly alliance, meeting periodically with the aim of giving one another by sharing ideas and suggestions related to the various aspects of their businesses. Except Hertz and Ritchie, none of the others was associated in a legal partnership. It was against it, only intended reciprocal assistance in sharing ideas and occasionally to assume certain guarantees when a member of the group met a momentary emergency. Each of the members of the Big Six was multimillionaire. This is not in itself a detail worthy of being mentioned. However, what deserves to be mentioned is the fact that these 6 men have learned the lesson of coordinating their minds by uniting them in a desire of perfect harmony, thus creating an organizing genius that has opened doors to them that generally remains closed to the common man. The United States Steel Corporation was one of the strongest and most powerful industrial organizations in the world. The idea from which this giant of the industry grew up germinated in the mind of Albert H. Gary, a suburban lawyer who had grown up in a small town of Illinois near Chicago. Gary surrounded himself with a team whose minds he successfully united in the goal of perfect harmony, creating the organizing genius. It has been proven to be the driving force behind the important United States Steel Corporation. Whenever you observe a spectacular success in any given field, whether it is the finance of industry policy, regardless of profession, behind this success is an individual who has applied the principle of the chemistry of the mind that has spawned an organizing genius. These phenomenal successes often seem to be the work of one person, but if you look carefully, you will discover the other individuals whose mind has been coordinated within his own. Remember that 2 or more people are needed to implement the principle of the chemistry of the mind that can create one organizing genius. Men cease to interest us when we discover their limits. The only sin is limitation. As soon as we realize the limits of a person, it loses all interest in our eyes. Emerson comment: one of the most remarkable stories in the era of the computer is that of the Intel Corporation, which at the time this new edition is ready for publication, is one of the leaders in the computer components industry. The most prominent personality at Intel is certainly Andrew Grove, the CEO of the immigrant company. He was server to table to meet his personal needs. However, his innate abilities as manager are only part of the because of. The success of Intel Grove was part of a collective brain that included Robert Nee and Gordon Moore, men whose technical knowledge and spirit of innovation helped propel the company. Each of these men is quite brilliant by itself, but together they made Intel the dominant company in its field, and one of the most profitable companies in the volatile high-tech industry. When knowledge is power, the power of man resides in con without organization, expressed through intelligent efforts. No effort can claim to be organized if the individuals involved do not coordinate their knowledge and energies in a spirit of perfect harmony. The lack of such coordination is the cause of almost all business failures. I conducted an interesting experiment with students at a college. I had asked to write the essay about how and why Henry Ford became rich. One part of the job was to estimate the nature of Ford's assets and describe the details. Most students collected financial reports and inventory of Ford's assets and used them as the basis for their estimate of its wealth. Hundreds of students identified as source of Ford's wealth: his bank accounts, raw materials, and finished products in inventory, his real estate and buildings. His customer estimated at about 10 to 25% of the value of Ford, his physical assets. Only one student replied the following: Henry Ford's assets consist mainly of 2 elements: operating capital, raw materials, and finished products, knowledge acquired from Henry Ford's own experience, and the cooperation of a well-trained organization that understands how to apply this knowledge to the best. From Ford's point of view, it is impossible to accurately assess the real dollar value of each of these 2 groups of assets, but I believe their value is the organized knowledge of companies. 75% cash value, and physical assets of all kinds, including raw materials and finished products, 25%, Henry. Ford's possession was his brain, then came this from his immediate circle of partner. Because it is thanks to their cooperation that have been accumulated the material assets that he controls. Destroy each of the Ford Motor Company's factories, every piece of machinery, every plot of raw materials or finished products, every car already machined, and every dollar deposited in banks, and Ford will remain economically the most powerful man on the planet. The brains that built the Ford empire could reoffend again, because capital is still available in unlimited quantity for constituted brains such as his. Ford was the most powerful man in the world economically speaking, because he had the most vivid and practical conception of the principle of organized knowledge ever seen until then. Despite its power and its financial success, it may be that he often committed errors in the application of the principles which generated this power. Because the methods of coordination of Ford's minds were often rudimentary, at least at the very beginning of the experiment, before acquiring the wisdom of the application, which came naturally with maturity. His application of the principle of the chemistry of the mind was, at least at the beginning, the result of a lucky alliance with other minds, particularly that of Edison, but it is more than likely that the remarkable insight of Mr. Ford concerning the laws of nature first stemmed from his great complicity with his spouse, long before his meeting with Mr. Edison or Firestone. People who succeed without knowing the real source of their success are often helped by their spouse, according to the application of the principle of organizing genius. Considering the intelligence note cable of Mrs. Ford, I have every reason to believe that it is his spirit, united with that of her husband, that gave him his first real start to power at the very beginning of his career. Mr. Ford had to fight powerful personal enemies, his illiteracy and lack of culture, which was more marked than for Edison or Firestone, all endowed by heredity, a natural entity of an aptitude conducive to the acquisition and application of knowledge. Ford had to bring his gifts beyond the limits of his education. In a short period of time, he managed to master 3 of the most stubborn enemies of humanity, and turned them into assets, constituting the real basis of his success: ignorance, illiteracy, and poverty. Anyone who manages to control these 3 major limitations and who manages to exploit them well, is well worth this in-depth analysis. We live in an area of industrial power, whose source is the organized effort. Not only the management of industrial enterprises has efficiently organized the workers by the trade union movement, but in the case of industrial mergers, as in the case of the United States Steel Corporation, almost unlimited power is regularly brought to our attention by the media, whether in the field of industrial affairs or finance, where enormous resources are under the umbrella of a single directorate, which has the effect of creating a great power one day, a bank group another day, a railway company, or a group of asseries merging in order to develop power through a highly organized and coordinated effort. Real power can be developed. Our modern libraries contain a poorly organized record of all knowledge of value, and this reflects the current degree of our civilization of which we are heirs. This knowledge does not represent power because it is not organized. Every type of energy, if it wants to survive, every specimen of animal or plant life, must be organized. The giant animals whose bones filled the cemetery of nature after their extinction have left the mute but tangible proof that non-organization means the annihilation of the smallest electron particle of matter, up to the largest star of the universe. Every material element located between these 2 extremes offer irrefutable proof that one of the first 2 laws of nature is that of the happy organization. The individual who recognizes the importance of this law and makes a duty to familiarize himself with the various ways of applying it advantageously, the wise businessman not only recognized the importance of the law of organized effort, but he made the fabric of its power. Several business people with no knowledge of the principle of the chemistry of the mind accumulated great power by simply organizing the knowledge that they had. The majority of those who discovered this principle and developed it into an organizing genius made this discovery by chance, often neglecting afterwards to recognize its real nature or to understand the source of their power. I am of the opinion that we can count on our fingers those people who have consciously used the principle of the chemistry of the mind in developing power through the union of minds. If this assessment is correct, you see that there is no fear that the practice of the chemistry of the mind is an area overburdened. One of the most difficult tasks for a businessman is to persuade his associates to coordinate their efforts in a spirit of harmony, to establish such strong cooperation in a group, no matter the impossible nature of the enterprise, is almost only the most effective leaders can achieve this highly sought-after goal. But from time to time one of them rises above the fray in the field of business or finance, such as Henry Ford, Thomas A. Edison, John D. Rockefeller, Senor E. Sherman, or James C. H. Hill. Power and success are practically synonymous terms. One gives birth to the other. Therefore, any person who has the knowledge and gift of developing power through the principle of harmonious coordination of effort through the fusion of minds can succeed in any reasonable endeavor for which a favorable outcome may be envisaged. You cannot become a power in your community or achieve lasting success in any company, as honorable as it may be, until you have grown up to blame yourself for your mistakes. Dear listeners, I hope you liked the book. You can listen to the full version by following the link in the description. We wish you all the best and hope that our books will change your life for the better.